All right, Garrett. Happy Wednesday, Garrett. Thanks for joining me on today's webinar. As you're joining
Having
us
me.
today and getting settled, would love to hear where you're joining from. So I'm in Houston. Garrett, you're in Dallas today.
I am.
Yeah, we're representing Texas for sure. But our Leadr team is spread out all over the country. But we do have quite a few of us that are in Texas. So we want to hear, where are you joining from? So as you're joining online, throw into the chat feature there in your Zoom panel where you're joining us from. Tulsa. All right, awesome. Tulsa, Oklahoma, our Texas neighbor for sure. Today, Garrett, we're going to be talking about a really pertinent topic that is employee health. This term can mean a lot of things, which is why we're facilitating this webinar, because we want to get clarity on what it means to actually make health a priority. Hey, Carissa, welcome. This is Carissa on our team. She's going to be helping behind the scenes. Hey, Carissa, welcome. And goodbye. Chris is going to be helping behind the scenes. Shout out to Carissa, who helps us with all things marketing. But okay, we've got people joining us from all over: Mount Pleasant, Texas, Ohio, League
More
City.
Texas representing.
That's right. I know we can't stop. Memphis. Awesome. Well, we're so glad you're here. Today's session is going to be really interactive. So feel free, grab your notes. If you're a Leadr customer, grab your Leadr agenda, take some notes. And we want to hear from you. So there's two ways you can do that throughout today's webinar. Number one is the chat feature. I'm going to be monitoring that throughout our time together today. And then secondly is the Q&A box. And so that's there in your Zoom panel. You can use both of those to be able to talk to Garrett and I throughout the webinar. Well, I wanted to start out today by sharing a little bit of our stories. And so Leadr is so special to me for several reasons. Number one, leadership development is my passion, and really what I've committed my career to so far, and what I plan on doing for the foreseeable future. And I'm the SVP of growth here at Leadr. I oversee our marketing team and really help with new initiatives, kind of vision of where we're going as we serve our customers. I've spent the last 9 years before I joined Leadr in executive search and staffing for values-based organizations. And so I have seen the reality of what it looks like, both for organizations around the world and also myself, when we're dealing with burnout and not serving our employees well by putting their health first. And so that's one of the reasons that I joined Leadr, was to really help provide some solutions around how do we really fully and practically provide full care and development for every person on our team. But Garrett Campbell is joining me today. He's our VP of Customer Success and also leads our Leadr Health division here at Leadr. And Garrett is a phenomenal team member for us because he was our #1 employee. So the first Leadr employee ever. And Garrett has had almost every job description on the team. And so Garrett, I would love for you to share your story and what brought you to Leadr.
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, first of all, if I haven't had the chance to meet everyone just yet, great to meet you. Again, my name is Garrett. I am what we call our VP of Customer Success. And so what that means is for all of our customers, for all of our partners, my team are the ones that are doing trainings and onboarding and helping you kind of make the most of our tool once you come on board. And my journey to Leadr really began with kind of a few different work histories or backgrounds that I came from, with some very similar to Holly, some really unhealthy environments. And those kind of paved the way for an introduction to Chris and Matt, our two founders. And through connecting with them, they decided that, hey, from day one of building this team, we want to start with people that are focused on really how we can help teams actually create some of this missional impact. And so I spent the first about 1.5 years or so at Leadr just doing research on, hey, what should we build? Why should we build it? How can we invest back into the people that are coming on board as partners? And so I feel pretty privileged to get to do that every day. It's a lot of fun.
Well, you're awesome at your job, Garrett, and we're so excited to have you on the team. So, Garrett, why are we talking about this topic of health? The first, I was kind of doing some research and found this quote by Barna, because here at Leadr, we serve churches, we serve nonprofits, we also serve businesses. So kind of a run of the gamut, but a large majority of our customers are churches. And so I was trying to do some research on, what does the data tell us about mental health in the church space specifically? And so Barna just released a study in November, so pretty recently, November of last year. 38% of US pastors have thought about quitting full-time ministry in the past year. What's critical about this is not just leave their job for another one. The data tells us that about 50% of people overall in the whole workspace are thinking about leaving their job if they haven't already in the next 12 months. But what this is saying is quitting full-time ministry altogether, 38%. And so then I thought, okay, well, what does the corporate world look like outside of the church? What are we dealing with when it comes to burnout and mental health? This is a long quote here, but it's so important. And so I want to unpack this together. Harvard Business Review partnered with a nonprofit that does a lot of studies on wellness and mental health in the workplace. And they did a study in 2019, and then they did one in 2021 and compared the results. And so just to look at in the 2-year difference with COVID and all of the unrest that we've had as a society in the last 2 years, and look at what this data is telling us. So 68% of millennials, which is up from 50% in 2019 of millennials, 81% of Gen Zers, which is up from 75% in 2019, have left roles for mental health reasons, both voluntary and involuntary. And you compare that with 50% of respondents overall. So what we're seeing here is that especially in the younger generations of Gen Z and millennials, which we know that combined, they make up 46% of the workplace. That's what Gallup tells us. And so this is critical because as we think about what Garrett and I think about all day, every day is leadership development. And so as we're thinking about developing leaders at every level of our organization, mental health and overall health of the employee has to be a part of that conversation if we're going to develop the future generation into leading our teams and our organizations. And then we look at the second part here, that 91% of respondents believed that a company's culture should support mental health, which is up from 86% in 2019. And so I know I'm preaching to the choir here because every single person that's joined this webinar today, you have signed up to get better at this. And so we applaud you. I know we're in good company here on this webinar today. But I think that this is a really great talking point for if you're on the executive team or report to somebody on the executive team at your organization, that these data points are critical because they're recent. And this is something that we need to have top of mind as we're developing our team. So that's what the data tells us, Garrett, but you have a unique vantage point in that your team serves all 600 plus and growing every day of our customers. And so, and from your vantage point of having conversations all day, every day about culture and leadership development and health of our teams, what are you seeing anecdotally with our organizations when it comes to health of our employees?
Yeah, it's a big question, Holly. And, first piece I'll mention is just kind of one final note on this stat here is if you do some of the quick math, right, that tells you that between 2019 and 2022, 18% of millennials left a job for mental health reasons for the first time, right? And another, 16%, 6% of Gen Z, if I'm doing my math right there, did the same, right? And that's pretty startling. And so some of the things that we're hearing for the very first time is, there's always been this kind of spectrum of organizations where you have on one side teams that are really comfortable having these conversations around mental health in particular. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have teams that maybe it's more of a generational gap or whatever the reason might be, where those conversations are just not comfortable. They're not commonplace. They're not things that are welcomed for us to invite our perspectives into and challenge each other on. And so working with our customers, that's something we hear really consistently is, hey, I might be a newer leader inside of my organization. How can I invest into and make some changes around the way that we approach those conversations? And that can be so challenging if you have a team around you that's not bought in or invested in that same mentality. And so my hope today is that we'll talk through some of that and maybe help give you some advice if that's you or if that's where you're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely, Garrett. Because I think one of the pain points, you nailed it. It's we know it's a problem, but now what do we do about it? And so that's what I hope that you and I can help just encourage those that are joining us today of, okay, I know it's a problem. Now what do I do? And so Garrett and I've come up with 5 steps that you can take today, start taking today to really prioritize health for your team. And so the first one is this concept of prioritizing psychological safety. So this has become a pretty, I don't know if I'm ready to say buzzword because I think it's important. I don't want to discredit the phrase psychological safety, but a topic of conversation and something that we talk a lot about here at Leadr. The best way that I can sum this up is a quote by Paul Santagata. I believe that's how we say his name. And he's the head of industry at Google. And he says, there's no team without trust. And that is why psychological safety is so important. The definition of psychological safety is creating an environment where people are not reprimanded for using their voice, where it's safe for them to come to their leadership and express their voice, their opinions, their thoughts without the fear of being reprimanded. And so that's why psychological safety is so important. That's something that we here at Leadr spend a lot of time thinking about is how can we further develop trust in the relationship between a manager and their direct report? And so, Garrett, I would love to hear from you with this concept of psychological safety. What does this practically look like when we're leading our teams?
Yeah, it's a big question and a big conversation point, right? And psychological safety, to Holly's point, can be a little bit of a buzzword. And so maybe to bring a little bit more or shine a light into this topic or this idea, this was actually one of the very first things that we researched in the early days at Leadr, was this idea of what does it look like to create cultures where we can feel free to be ourselves, but we can also feel free to have really candid conversations, which aren't always the fun conversations, right? And so one of the big ways that we see teams investing into this is this idea of creating a culture where feedback can be shared openly and candidly, and that has to be modeled from the top down. And so inside of Leadr, for example, we have our feedback tool is one avenue for where we invest into that inside of our product. But even outside of Leadr, where this can really start for you is, if you talk to some of your team members, do they feel like they can share feedback with you candidly on how you are doing as a leader, on how your organization is performing, on how you're moving towards your mission, your milestones, your metrics in this season, right? And so ask some of those questions, invite people to ask the same. And what I think you'll find is just a starting point is, hey, if they know that they can come to you with those challenges, or if you see those challenges coming to you often, you can trust that you're starting to build some of that environment where these conversations can happen a little bit more candidly. And final thought I'll share with you here is along the same line of thinking, ask yourself the question of, hey, when was the last time I heard some really challenging feedback from one of my team members? And if you haven't heard something recently, what I'll share with you is it's probably a pretty good indicator that not that you're doing amazing and that things are going fantastic, but it might be an indicator that they don't necessarily feel safe sharing some of that information today. And so again, asking the question, leading by example is just a great starting point in some of this conversation.
Garrett, you and I are going with our leadership team here at Leadr, going through 5 dysfunctions of a team right now. And you gave a talk last week to our team on the dysfunction of, oh my goodness, what was it? Tell me again. Mm-hmm. Commitment. Yes. Okay. And one of your points, you like dropped the mic here. It was amazing. And it said, complaining is underrated. And everyone was like, what is Garrett about to say? And so what I would like, what?
It's a scary slide to put on the screen.
It was scary. Yeah. But can you talk about what you meant by that? Because you really challenged my thinking on complaining is underrated. So talk to us about what you mean by that.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny moment because in the moment, some of that just is that gut reaction of we've all either seen or maybe even been a part of cultures and teams where that culture, that mindset, that mentality that people bring to the table is this idea of how can I highlight everything that's wrong with what's going on around me, right? And to be very clear, that's not healthy. That's not what we're looking for. But it's exactly that same idea, which is, hey, if you're hearing concerns from your team, you can have a pretty good idea of how they're thinking, how they're feeling, how they're doing overall, how they imagine and envision you and the organization and where you're going next. If you're not hearing those concerns, what it's telling you is that it's not that, again, those concerns don't exist. It's that they're being talked about in environments and circles where you're not invited into the room or into the conversation, right? And so, again, it's not that we necessarily want to encourage a culture of complaining and focusing on problems without solutions. But as a starting point, I would ask yourself again, when was the last time you gave someone a chance to vent? Do people come to you often with those concerns? Because if they're not, again, those conversations are happening. They're just happening elsewhere.
So good, Garrett. It's such a good point. So number one, when we're thinking about how do we prioritize health for our team, we have to prioritize psychological safety in general. Any, wellness program or stipend or any of the tips and tricks that we try to address when it comes to health or wellness, those are only Band-Aids if we're not creating an environment of a foundation based on psychological safety across the organization. So thanks for reminding us of that, Garrett. And also just take this quote with you. There's no team without trust. So as Garrett challenged us, let's think about the last time we got hard feedback from our team and making sure that we're building a culture of trust between each of ourselves and our direct reports and also our organization in general. All right, number two, provide flex and hybrid options. So one thing that we just addressed at the beginning, Garrett, was the statistics around Gen Z and millennials. Just the huge uptick in them leaving for mental health reasons. Coincidingly, in some of my own research, I've kind of been obsessed lately about how do we lead Generation Z. I'm a millennial and I had an experience this summer leading an intern who was in the Generation Z generation. And for the first time, I had a realization where I went, I am not the young one anymore, because even though this person is only about 13 years younger than me, our entire perspectives about the workplace are different because the rate of change that has happened between him and me, even though we're really not that far apart in age or years, is completely different. And so this point right here is critical for the next generation and what they're looking for in the workplace. But also there's a lot of data out there right now that's talking about, especially moms in the workplace, lots of burnout as their, children have had to be in and out of daycare because it's closed, or school because it has to be from home. And the stress that adds of them trying to do their job well and also provide childcare. And there's a lot of dads who are navigating that as well right now. And so providing flex and hybrid options is something that we have to address. We can no longer just push it under the rug if we're going to provide full care for our employees. And so another great data point for us, Garrett, this is again from that same study from Harvard Business Review. Respondents reported that their company's return to office plans were negatively impacting their mental health. The top two reasons given were the policies around in-person versus remote work. That was 41%. And then the lack of work-life balance or flexibility based on the policy, which was 37% of people. So Garrett, as you're talking to our customers, and I'm sure you get lots of questions about navigating this flexibility and hybrid options, what are you hearing across the board?
There's really two camps that we see, I think, most often with our customers. And so, if you think back for a quick moment and look at the year of 2020 as a whole, many teams that had never historically had a remote or flexible or hybrid working option were suddenly forced into this scenario where you're navigating that for the very first time. And you're learning how to lead a team remotely, how to interact with your staff, how to care for them well. And these two camps that we kind of saw emerge from that was camp number one, those that were a little bit terrified of it, I think is where some of this came from. And they were running away from this idea of hybrid or remote work and just asking the question of, hey, how fast and how quickly can we get back into the office? And, for teams that, again, historically have always been in person, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but there's a big question of how do we approach it and how do we have the conversation? And then on the other side of the spectrum, this other camp is this camp that said, hey, we know that this is a unique and challenging season. and something that we're having to, again, lean into for the very first time, explore for the very first time. Let's focus on people through the process and ask the question of what can we do to care for our teams really well. And so, our experience, what we heard consistently time and time again from our customers that walk through that together is, in challenges like that, and remote work can be one of those things that's a little bit polarizing. You have to remember that on the other side of the conversation is real people that we want to care for really well. And so let's push past some of the politics. Let's push past some of the, mentalities that we might carry with us and just try and understand where are they coming from and ask that question. And so, again, we've had that conversation countless times of what does this look like? If it's something that you're not considering today or you don't do at this point in time, what I'd really challenge you to do is lean in, hey, why don't we? Why don't we offer a remote or a flexible option? And for some teams, it may not be a great option. For others, it might just be that fear component. And that's something I'd like to challenge you just to push past with that end goal in mind of, again, how do we just care for our people really well?
Yeah, it's so true, Garrett, because one of the biggest pushbacks I hear from executives or leaders on the flex and hybrid options is they think that hearing that phrase is just letting people work from wherever they want and however they want and do whatever they want. But that's not what this is. I often find that leaders who are most scared of providing flexibility and hybrid options are the ones that haven't been intentional about communicating clear goals, which is one of our 5 foundations here at Leadr. Clear goals and behavioral norms, which is the expectations of how we work. And so when we have a culture of caught versus taught, caught is more in person. And frankly, it's often easier to lead that way. But what happens is it's not intentional. We have to write down our values and infuse them into our organizations. We have to set clear goals from the very top and then infuse those goals down into our departments and delegate that authority through the team. We have to proactively communicate, think a little bit ahead and not be reactive. And so what happens is flexibility and hybrid options cause us as the leader to have to level up. And I think that's a good thing. But I think that's where the pain and discomfort can come when people hear flex and hybrid options, because they have a mentality that if I can't see you, then you're not working. Whereas the reality is, this day and age where most of us can do most of our job from our phone. We have access to our email, to our softwares that we're logging into all day, every day, to our Leadr agenda, from the convenience of our phone. And we're often on all the time. And that's why it's important to provide those flex and hybrid options, because if we're expecting someone to be in front of their computer from 9 to 5 and then also be accessible after hours, that's where it gets really unhealthy. But if we can have clear goals, clear expectations about what performance should look like, and then we're coming from a leadership perspective of an attitude of service and support for how can I support you in achieving your goals and doing your best work, that's where the magic can happen, where we can really unlock the best work for our team. Garrett, we've got some great, sorry, go ahead, Garrett.
No, I think I was going to say the same thing that you were, which is, Bill posted an amazing comment in the chat there. And Bill, one thing you said right at the end is we just have to communicate very well as we take some of this flexibility into the workplace. And that's exactly it, right? One of the decisions that we made early on is a core part of our culture at Leadr. We want it to be this idea of proactive communications, or said another way, no surprises, right? And what we've found is that as that transparency, as that communication goes up, your ability to build that trust, your ability to give as much flexibility as is needed or as is helpful in the role, it becomes so much easier when you know where someone's at, what's going on in their day, how you can help them when a blocker or a barrier comes up in their path. It just makes all these conversations so much easier.
So true. Absolutely. All right. So number 1 was prioritize psychological safety. Number 2, provide flex and hybrid options. And then number 3 is my favorite, which is Pto Like A Boss. So this is a phrase that we have here at Leadr. It's part of our culture. We use Slack for our internal messaging. And we have a Slack channel that's called Pto Like A Boss. And I actually have a personal story here, Garrett, that I'd love to share on this topic. So I'm someone who doesn't often have the healthiest of boundaries when it comes to that work-life balance. I love to work. My passion is helping organizations grow. And so it is what I love to do. I get a lot of energy from work. But what that means is I often can quickly lead to burnout if I'm not careful and I don't have that accountability in my life to be able to switch off and be healthy. So at Leadr, we have a phrase we like to call run fast and long. So think about, the marathon runners or our world record holders for marathoners. They run fast and long, which is a completely different skill set of sprinters. And I'm definitely more of the sprinter. And so I'm working harder to be more of that marathon person. Not literally yet. I'm not training for a marathon yet, but
yeah.
Right. And so I was at my last role for 9 years, and it was also a startup. So a hyper growth, and it was so fun to be a part of growing an organization like that. And then I transitioned off to start my own company, which is where Leadr became a client of mine. And I never took any time off. I mean, I quit. I was done with the job one day, and then I had my first workshop as a consulting company the next day, and I did not stop. And so when I joined the team full-time at Leadr, Matt Trusted, our CEO, he said, Holly, one of the things I want you to prioritize is taking some time off, because you really need to be able to slow down for a little bit, disconnect. And I said, yeah, great. I'll do that, Matt. Thanks so much. And then, a couple months would pass by and he'd go, hey, when are you taking that time off? I'm like, yeah, I need to do it. I'll look at my calendar. Well, fast forward to December of this last year. And in our one-on-one meeting, he said, Holly, I've asked you on a monthly basis to take time off and you haven't. And so right now we're going to pull up your calendar and you have to choose 2 weeks in the month of December that you're going to take off, because it's that important. I want you to run fast and long. And so right there, he made me commit to those 2 weeks, and then literally locked me out of email and Slack. So turned it off where I couldn't have access, because he knew I needed that accountability so I could PTO like a boss. And so that's a culture that I'm so thankful for that we have at Leadr. I mean, we work really, really hard, and sometimes that's, after work hours, but it's really important to us that when our team takes time off and PTOs like a boss, so we can come back refreshed. And so a little bit of what that looks like here, I thought this was fun to show some of our own team. Like Callie on our team went snowmobiling, mobiling, and posted that in the channel. So we got to celebrate her taking time off. And then Tyler and his wife went to Disney World. Alicia went to Vail with her friends. And then James got married over New Year's. And so we got to celebrate that in that PTO channel where it's celebrated for our team to take time off and have that work-life balance or integration that they need. So Garrett, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. I think this is something that you personally do really, really well, and what you're seeing across the board as you're working with our customers.
Thanks, Holly. And first of all, I love that example in your story of, at some point you just kind of have to force it in some of those challenging or difficult or busy seasons. And a really cool story I wanted to share, first of all, is I've heard this from 2 different customers of ours that I've worked with. And the approach that they take is, for most organizations in the United States, we have a maximum amount of hours you can take per year, that kind of thing. It's a super common approach. What they set annual minimums. So the minimum amount of vacation time you have to use in a calendar year. And the way that they would kind of enforce that or drill that through or help teams prioritize that time is they would look at it once a quarter in some of the quarterly conversations that they were having. And so what that meant is managers and kind of team leads or line leaders were responsible for, hey, how well is your team resting? How are they building in some of those cadences over time? And keep in mind again that, as a leader, you set the tone and you set the example for how your team looks at and sees you either prioritizing rest, prioritizing time away, or not, and doing the opposite, right? And so it can start to build this impression of, hey, we as an organization don't prioritize rest. We don't prioritize time away if I'm never seeing my leadership make that first step, right? And so I saw a question in the chat of, hey, how do I use more time? If you've got the time and just don't have a chance, or it's, again, busy seasons, there's so much going on at any given moment. And the first thing I would challenge you to do is, number one, the biggest thing that's helped me, I'm pretty consistent about, I take about a full week off every 6 months or so to do some kind of trip, whether it's visiting family or a road trip or whatever it might be. And then I try and do shorter trips kind of throughout or in the meantime. What's really been crucial for me is, hey, do you have that support system inside of your team? And can you build towards this place where you can delegate effectively, you can rely on the people around you to the point where you have that backup and you know that the world's not resting on your shoulders in those challenging seasons. And so that's been the biggest help for me. But Holly, I'd be curious to hear, your December trip, even as an example. What allowed you to do that? What allowed you to take that time away, even in a challenging season?
Yeah, one of the things that Matt shared with me was one of the most powerful leadership development tools is the phrase, you decide. And so to be able to tell your team, like, hey, in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be offline. And so you get to decide. It's up to you to step into, fill the gap of that leadership that I'm going to, not be filling for the next 2.5 weeks. It's a great opportunity for you to intentionally develop your team. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't plan and that you're not intentional about proactively planning for that time away. So for me, it was really important that I spent probably the 3 days before I left, really intentional delegation and preparation for my team so that they didn't feel like they were completely lost while I was away. So it was a good exercise for me in delegation, but also for my team in stepping up into that leadership role. And what that enabled me to do was see somebody on my team who really filled that gap while I was away. And so when I got back, I was able to promote her into a leadership role on our team because we had that exercise of her really being able to step into that and grow and develop, improve that while I was gone. And so I just think you have to do it. It is scary, can cause a lot of anxiety, but I think that's part of the problem. And I can only say this because it's something I struggle with, but a lot of us are addicted to that reactionary, the feeling of being needed. It can be addicting. And so I think it's important for us to turn that off and allow other people on our team to step up and lead. And it also shows us where our gaps are on our team. You might come away and something just completely, a ball was completely dropped. And that's a great opportunity for you to optimize your systems and processes, or maybe you need to hire someone to help in that area. So great point, Garrett. All right. Number 1 was prioritize psychological safety. Number 2 was provide flex and hybrid options. 3 was PTOing like a boss. And then 4 is driving care through consistent one-on-ones. And so a belief that we have here at Leadr, which I would love to hear if you're a Leadr customer, let us know in the chat. But we believe here at Leadr that the one-on-one meeting, which is an intentional meeting between a manager and their direct report, is the most powerful way to consistently care for every single employee. And so in this one-on-one meeting that's on the calendar, we recommend at least bi-weekly. I personally recommend weekly because I think an organization moves at the speed of trust. And so if you're only having that one-on-one every other week or once a month, it's just hard to move fast. And trust can easily break in a month period if you're not communicating and having that intentional time together. And so this is our belief. We are bullish on the one-on-one meeting. If you talk to anybody on our team, you will hear all about it. And so I wanted to share a couple of examples of what it looks like, practically speaking, to drive care through the one-on-one. I'm definitely not perfect at it. It's an area where I'm continuing to grow, but it is something that I'm prioritizing because I tend to lean more on the execution of the job that needs to get done. That's my natural wiring, is to jump into a meeting. Hey, how you doing, Garrett? Good, good. Okay, let's talk about this project that's behind. What I need to do is pause, be present, and focus first on the care and development of the team member that I'm meeting with, because really performance comes out of that employee feeling cared for and developed. So practically speaking, here's what that looks like for a couple members of my team. So this is our Leadr tool. This is my one-on-one meeting with Anna on our team. She's our marketing manager. And ever since she's joined our team back in August of last year, we have 2 recurring agenda items at the very top of every single meeting that we've had. And I ask her a question around care, and Anna asks me a question around care. And so if you'll look at Anna's care card on the right, she's an Enneagram 2 and she's a helper. And so Anna is phenomenal. One of the things that makes her great as a person and also great at her job is that she loves to help and is fantastic at execution. But what that can often do is that she prioritizes everyone else's needs over her own. And so as her leader, I want to make sure that I'm asking her on a weekly basis, hey, Anna, what are you doing this week to care for yourself and prioritize your own needs? Because that's harder for her than actually caring for the other people on the team. And so she knows I'm going to ask her about that every single week. And I also have it bookmarked for her review. So it's that important that we're going to talk about it in her performance review that we have twice a year of how she is caring for herself, because I want her to be around Leadr for a really long time. And I want to make sure that she's healthy. And then secondly, she asks me every week, what's one accomplishment from last week that you're proud of? Because as I mentioned, I'm really great at getting to all the things that need to be fixed and how things can be better. And I need help stopping and smelling the roses and seeing where we're winning. And so she helps me do that. And caring for me as her leader each week to stop and look at something that I'm proud of that happened the week before. And we usually spend at least the first 10 minutes of our one-on-ones, which our one-on-ones are about 45 minutes each week. Yours don't have to be, sometimes they're 30, sometimes they're an hour. It just really depends on the person. But we spend usually about the first 10 minutes or so on these 2 questions. And they're often hard for us to answer, even though both of us know that we're going to be talking about this every single week. We usually both have to take a couple minutes to figure out what our answers are going to be, which is exactly the point, to prioritize that care for each other. Another example is Carissa on my team, who some of you, sneak peek to the next point, sorry, that you saw a couple minutes ago, but Carissa is our senior marketing manager on our team. And Carissa is phenomenal at doing all the things. She loves to take on new responsibilities. You'll see on the right, she is an Enneagram 3. She loves challenges. But that can often mean that she's juggling a lot in her life. And so every single week, I ask her at the beginning of our meeting, how are you doing emotionally, spiritually, and physically juggling family life, church planning life, and leader life? Because it's important to her that she does all 3 of those things well. And I want to make sure as her leader that I am causing both of us to stop at the beginning of our one-on-one meeting and really look at what does that balance look like in Carissa's life so that she can do all of those things well. She can be a great mom. She can be a great wife. She can be an awesome church leader and also an awesome employee here at Leadr. So those are a couple of practical examples of how I try to do this in my own leadership. But Garrett, would love to hear from you. You see a lot of different one-on-one meetings happen through all, 8,000 of our monthly active users on Leadr. What do you think when it comes to driving care through consistent one-on-ones?
Yeah, well, first things first, I love the examples that you shared here, Holly. And, this can be really challenging to start, is maybe the first thing I'll mention. Of often taking the first step can be the most uncomfortable, the most awkward part of making this kind of a natural rhythm that feels comfortable and is something you can connect on every week. And I'll typically hear kind of 2 challenges with getting there. The first of those is that comfort piece, but the second can just be, hey, when we're in a busy season, it's really easy to get into execution mode and kind of forget to take the time to take the 5 minutes to ask those questions. But one initial thought for you is our topic suggestions library in Leadr. So for anyone that has a Leadr account, if you're a Leadr customer, that topic suggestions button that you see right on screen there is actually a great starting point. And most of those topic suggestions actually came from questions that our customers sent to us and recommended to us over the last 3.5 years. And so we have a couple templates in there. One of them is actually a health check-in template, which is literally these questions of, hey, how can you invest in terms of care into how your team is doing, how they're growing, what's going well in this season and what's going poorly. So again, know those questions came from other people that are just like you. And I would highly recommend that you take a few minutes to read through some of the examples that are in there and see if they'd be helpful for you. But
Absolutely. Oh yeah, go
oh
ahead.
yeah, go ahead, Ollie.
Oh, I was just saying that's a great starting point, Garrett. I love how practical that is just start with being uncomfortable. That's okay. Add one of those topic suggestion questions in there and just start there and ask your team member next week in your one-on-one.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And actually, yesterday I was visiting a church in Florida, so I was traveling a little bit. And one of the cool examples that someone on their team actually shared with me is, hey, for those types of questions, they felt a little bit uncomfortable in the moment having that reminder right at the top, so the other person knows that they planned the question in advance, or thinking on it in advance. And first of all, I don't think that's something to be uncomfortable about, because it shows that you care enough to prioritize the conversation. But what they did that I thought was really creative is there's a little checkbox in Leadr where you can mark an agenda item as private, as something only you can see and the other person can't see. And so they have a recurring item every week that they marked as private with their employees' spouse's name and kids' names. And they just remind themselves every week, just, hey, ask how they're doing, see what's going on, right? And so it's these really small, really little things, but all of this has to build on this idea of this consistent check-in, or this consistent conversation that you're building with each person. And so, if you haven't taken that step, that's really kind of the starting point for all of this, is have that conversation every other week, or to Holly's point, if you can make the time every week. And I can promise you won't regret it.
100%, Garrett. Could not agree more. I love this quote. This is a good sums up kind of what we're talking about, which is by Theodore Roosevelt. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think as leaders, we often feel that pressure of, I have to have all the answers. People are looking to me to have everything together. But really they're not. They're looking to you for, do you care for them? I think this is especially important for the next generation, where they can figure out how to do anything. They are a generation that has grown up Googling and YouTubing anything. And so for us as the leader to take on the pressure of knowing all the answers, they're not looking for that. They're looking for a mentor and a guide who can help develop them as a full, whole person. And that starts with just caring about them. And so they're the most connected generation than ever before, but often their relationships are the most surface level of any other generation. And so they're looking to really go deep with you as their leader. I did a survey to the Generation Z team members on our own team. And that was one of the biggest things I heard was, spend time with us, invest in us, because that's why we're here. And so that was a big takeaway for me. So thank you, Teddy Roosevelt. Great quote. All right. Our fifth point here, and this is, Garrett, where I start to get on a little bit of a soapbox. So bear with me if maybe I've already gotten on like 10 soapboxes today, but this is to take a look at your health plan. So before you log off and your eyes glaze over because you get overwhelmed with health plans, I get it. I'm there too. I have to ask Garrett all the time for his help on reading about health plans. But this is critical. So in my last role at Vanderbilt, we actually surveyed all of our customers and asked we did a benefit survey. So we wanted to see, what do the benefits look like that churches are providing. And one of the things that we found, which is heartbreaking, was that over 30% of churches offer zero healthcare, zero. On top of that, we found that the majority of churches do not have a sabbatical policy. So talking about Pto Like A Boss, they don't even have a sabbatical policy. Those that do, the majority of them don't take effect for 7 years. Well, guess what the average tenure of a pastor is? 3.5. So the majority of pastors will never even see the fruit of that sabbatical because they're burned out 3.5 years in and they leave. And I think a huge component of that is the stress that we put on our team members. So whether you're in ministry or a church or working for a business, health plans are so important. It's that and compensation, which kind of go hand in hand, because a lot of times our health plan costs something from the employee. Yes, it costs something from the organization and often a lot of money, but it also costs the employee something. But when they are going to work and thinking about putting food on the table or how they're going to take their kid to the doctor who's been sick, they are not going to be showing up their best selves and doing their best work. And this is not caring for their health. And so, Garrett, you're kind of our internal expert on this. This is one of the reasons why we created a whole division called Leadr Health, because it's such a problem with our customers. And we want to be a part of helping our customers provide better healthcare so that we can fully care for the entire employee. So talk to me about what you're seeing when it comes to health plans and health insurance as you're working with our customers.
Yeah, there's really two main roadblocks that I hear most often in those conversations. And both of them are really, really understandable. And the first of those is often just a lack of awareness or understanding of how do health plans work? What does a great health plan look like? What does a poor health plan look like, right? And that's a learning curve that everyone has to kind of walk down in the United States in the way that our system operates, right? And so what I'd encourage you to do, just as a starting point, is if either you as an individual or different members of your team have a hard time looking through and understanding how to make the most of any health plans that you already have in place, talk to someone like Leadr, talk to an expert, talk to somebody that can help point you in the right direction or answer those questions. And even as a really practical step, consider offering sessions to your employees and to your staff where you coach them on how to use their benefits. So if you already offer benefits today, something that can be really helpful for people is, I remember back when I was in my first professional jobs coming out of college, I had no idea what a deductible was, right? And so for me to go to the doctor, I didn't know what my copay rate would be. I didn't know any of these details or how they worked. And so I don't think I went to the doctor for a full 6 years, right? And I was a little bit lucky that I didn't need to. I got by, right? Not everybody has that opportunity and not everybody is that lucky, right? And so think about offering that kind of a conversation as a way to just coach and train up your team in how they can make the most of the benefits that you already offer. And the second roadblock that we typically hear is cost, right? And if we think about this is where it really comes into a kind of a blocker between us as an organization being able to offer the amazing benefits that we all want to offer because we're caring people that want to invest in our teams. And what I challenge you with, number one, is just about for every organization in the United States, health plans tends to be one of their top handful of line items in the budget. It is expensive, and that's unfortunate, but that's a reality. And what I want you to view that investment as an investment into your people, right? But the second piece is have some conversations. Our team, this is one of the things that we do is work with teams and help coach them on how they can find more affordable avenues for providing those plans. Because to Holly's point, when we don't invest into healthcare, when we don't invest into the benefits that we offer to our employees, not only does it demonstrate a potential gap in the way that we think about kind of the holistic journey an employee has as a part of our teams, but it also just loses out on an opportunity for us to just lean in and say, hey, we care really deeply about you. We want you to be successful here. We want you to be on our team for as long as you want to be here. And while you're here, we want you to do amazing things, right? And so a lot there, but again, two practical suggestions. Number one is consider setting up some of those education type moments for your staff, whether us or other organizations would love to help you in that process. Or number two, look for options to save on costs and improve on coverage. And those options do exist even in a world as complicated or as challenging as health plans.
Yeah, well, and I'm so thankful for you jumped in and have figured that out for our customers. You break it down and so simply and easy to understand. And someone like me who gets really overwhelmed by the nuts and bolts of things like insurance, just so grateful to have you on the team to be able to walk us through that so we can truly care for our team. And I love what you said about setting up those educational sessions, because it's often embarrassing for an employee to come to you and have questions, or maybe they feel like if it has to do with the cost of the health plan, they're going to be embarrassed to expose that maybe they're having trouble paying for it. And so just to take that off the table and have a conversation about it and educate your team about what's best for them is such a great idea and so caring, Garrett. Quick look at what the data is telling us too, is that, oh, there we go. Here it is. I don't know. My slides keep skipping. I'm so sorry. So a study by SHRM, our HR professionals, says that 61% of employees say that their productivity was affected by their mental health. And 94% of American workers report experiencing stress at their workplace. And so this is, again, a really big deal, and why it's so important for us to prioritize mental health, because it impacts productivity and the full care and development of every person on our team. And so we're going to jump into Q&A, but to kind of sum this up of why we're so passionate about this here at Leadr, we are people development software. And so first and foremost, we are focused on our mission, which is developing 1 million leaders. And as we've done that, as we've come alongside our customers with helping support them on the leadership development side, we've realized there was a big gap in core HR support for our customers. Lots of our customers are doing manual HR support, from payroll to time off to PTO tracking, and really bogging down their team. I don't know anybody, Garrett, that went into HR to spend more time in paperwork. Most people went into HR to support their team, to provide resources for the humans on their team. And so our goal is to help bring some more efficiency and support there from a technological perspective. And then additionally, on the health plan side, we just saw a huge gap in the support of health plans for our customers, where a lot of team members didn't have coverage or were paying out of pocket. And so we've been able to come alongside our customers to provide them with health plans. And so that's what we do here at Leadr. We'd love for you to reach out to our team if we can help. You can go to our website, leadr.com, or you can email us. So I'm holly.tate@leadr.com, and Garrett is garrett.campbell@leadr.com. I'll throw that in the chat. But with that, would love for us to open up with Q&A. We've kind of answered some, or sorry, not open up, close our time out with Q&A. We have answered quite a few throughout, but feel free to drop your questions in through either the Q&A panel in Zoom or through the chat feature. But Garrett, I'm curious, my first question for you, as people are dropping in their questions, one is from the one-on-one perspective, where do you feel like is the biggest challenge in the one-on-one meeting that you see across the board? Is it, overwhelming of knowing what questions to ask? Is it the consistency of feeling like they don't have enough time? Why do you think one-on-one meetings can be so challenging?
There's really kind of two sides to this, which is number one, the challenge of, do we actually hold the conversation or do we hold the meeting? And then two is kind of what do we dig into during that time? How do we make that time effective? And so, two specific examples I'll share. One is typically in a busy week, the very first thing that we cut off of our calendars is our one-on-ones, right? And what can help a ton is if you don't have a weekly or biweekly recurring time set up for that meeting, just start there. It helps you prioritize it, and even try and set a rule for yourself of, hey, I don't reschedule those conversations, right? Those conversations, once they are set, they do not move outside of, some kind of emergency or scenario that comes up, right? And so that would really be the starting point. And then kind of the second piece there, again, is that challenge of what do we talk about when we're in the conversation? And I remember a place I used to work a few years back. I've had all kinds of different one-on-ones at all kinds of different employers. But I remember one specifically where my manager at the time basically said, hey, this time is your time, come to the table, ready to ask questions. And what kind of the implication behind that is, hey, I'm not going to put any prep work into these. I just want to show up and kind of check the box and be good to go. And so every week, my one-on-ones felt like work. They felt like a project where I had to spend 15, 30 minutes, whatever it was, preparing for this conversation, where I didn't really know what that other person wanted out of those moments. And so what can be really challenging is in that type of environment, it's a great idea to say this is an open forum and come with anything. And at the same time, we have to balance that with putting in some of the effort ourselves and investing into that conversation. So even just start by kind of laying out the ground rules. Hey, we're going to do this once every week, once every 2 weeks, whatever it might be. And every week, I want both of us to come to the table with a few ideas of what's going well, what's not going well, what can we improve on. And then final thought there is early on at Leadr, we identified kind of 3 components of a good one-on-one. And what those 3 things are is, number one, do you talk about life outside of work? Do you talk about what's going on in your personal life, how things are going, how you're feeling, how your family's doing? Number 2, do you talk about your projects? This is the easy one for most people. right? So, hey, what do we need to check the box on? What projects have we moved forward in this last season that we can continue to dig into? And then number three, and one of the most challenging, is where are you growing, or what are you working towards in this season? And a mentality that I've worked on with a lot of our customers over the last season or the last couple of years is, hey, if you can come to a place where that person's goals are aligned to where you as an organization want to go, that's where you're going to see the most progress happen in a relationship. And so get creative with that person. If they tell you that they want to take a next step in their career, help align that pathway for them of where their growth in their seat today can open up some of those opportunities or allow them to use their strengths more. So a lot there, but hope that's a helpful start.
So helpful. That was awesome. Even just starting with those 3 things to cover in the one-on-one is a great place to start. Got a couple of insurance questions here. So Seth is asking, as a church who doesn't have a plan in place for healthcare, how do you recommend starting that conversation with the senior pastor or leadership?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, ultimately healthcare is, it's really difficult to initiate that conversation from any perspective that's not someone on the HR or leadership team. And so first of all, I just want to kind of feel for you there of that can be a really, really challenging place to open that conversation. But I think first things first, our goal has to be across the board. If you put health plans to the side for a moment, building a culture where we can challenge and share candid feedback really openly. And if you can't do that as the starting point, I'm gonna say that this conversation is gonna have a tough time of going well, right? It's gonna be tough to navigate this in a way that lands really well. And so that might have to be your first step, is investing into, hey, can I share feedback? Can I challenge directly? And can I do it in a way that shows that I'm only doing this because I care about you and I care about everybody else in our team and how well we can operate together? So start there. From there, it ultimately comes down to a question of why. If we don't offer it today because of budget, well, hey, how can we work together to realign and refocus resources to make sure that this is something that we can offer to our staff? A very strong belief that I have is health benefits is something every team should offer. And that can be really challenging if you're especially a younger organization, an organization that's just getting started, just putting together these plans for the very first time and making budgets work. And at the same time, you almost have to view this as a requirement of us existing as an organization long-term. And that may mean that we can't grow at the rate that we want to in terms of hiring. It may mean that we don't get to invest into some of the key initiatives or projects that we want to. But if it's that conversation of, hey, care versus growth, where do we start? I think we have to begin here so that we can expand into this long-term.
So wise, Garrett. Absolutely. And Seth, I would say, maybe start with this webinar. This would be a good opportunity. The data that we have here, is the reason I included so much data is because this can be a hard conversation. And so to start with what the facts are telling us and what the industry across the board is saying with the workplace could be a great place to start. All right, Garrett, we have a question here from Brian. One of our challenges is that as our employees age, their plans get more expensive, which almost creates a de-incentivization towards longevity. How should we be looking at making this shift, and how could Leadr help us with that?
Some big words there, Brian. So thanks for helping grow our vocabulary a little bit. This is a fantastic question. So this is a very challenging reality of the healthcare world, right? Organizations like Blue Cross Blue Shield or any major carrier build their business off of mitigating risk. And as someone gets older, risk goes up, right? And that's not the fun side of the conversation on health, where we dig into how can we make this a win for our team. This is a challenge of how do we make the logistics work, right? And so to some degree, you have to know that even that cost increasing is being offset by, hopefully, if you have an employee that's been with you for a long time, their effectiveness in their seat and as a part of the organization is growing. And so that cost may be going up, but it should be going up at the same time as we're seeing our team get more aligned, our team be able to output more than ever, our team being better focused on kind of our shared mission and outcome as a team. So yes, that cost will grow. At the same time, there are avenues that can help with that. So there are a number of different types of health coverage plans in the insurance world. And some of those types of plans will have different staggered costs based on age versus others. One of the approaches that we really commonly take at Leadr is an approach called individual plans or individual coverage that allows us to leverage some pretty significant tax credits to reduce the cost of those plans for your staff. And so, initiate a conversation with us, reach out to one of our team members. We'd love to see, or at least get you some numbers to see if that's something that we can help with.
Absolutely, Garrett. I love what you said at the beginning there with looking at, because it goes back to what you said during the webinar content part, was look at it as an investment in your team. And so even though that cost is going up, hopefully we're making an investment in someone who's added a lot of value to our team. I'm dropping Garrett and my email here. There is one more question. I want to combine two questions. I got a private chat and then a question that's anonymous in the Q&A that I want to address before we end today, because it's that important. So the first one was, if my company does none of this and shows no interest in any of my suggestions to do so, is that a clear sign to leave? And then the other person said, my boss cannot get over the fear fact of what you were talking about with point one, which was the psychological safety. Any suggestions? And so I feel for you, and I'm so glad that you're asking this question. But at the end of the day, number one, I would say, first of all, make sure you're very clear and adamant about giving this feedback. I know I've been there before where I've been too scared to speak up. And looking back, I wish that I would have had the courage to respectfully voice what I was seeing happen in the organization. And so I would encourage you to make sure, sometimes it feels like when we're that frustrated, it feels like we've communicated things when we actually haven't. And so again, do it in a way that's respectful and where you're doing it out of a spirit of care for the entire organization. And so I would say, before you make the decision to leave, if you do believe in the mission of the organization that you're with, make it a point to bring up these topics. Often executive leaders are the last to know. And so for you to bring that to the table will really mean a lot. And then based on their response, if it's defensiveness or dismissive, that's where then you can make the decision of, okay, it might be time for me to look elsewhere. And again, would just encourage you to provide resources, send them some data, invite them to take a look at Leadr. I know it sounds like a sales pitch, but it's true. I mean, that's literally why we exist, because of those two questions that we got of leaders who maybe they were never led. Maybe they never had examples of good leadership in their own life, but they got to a place where they're leading an organization. And so we can help you set up some of those healthy habits to create change in your organization. All right. Well, Garrett, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. I know I learned a lot, and our team would love to connect with you. Reach out anytime. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.